Many of us feel overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information that we receive each day. Emails flood our inboxes and cry out for a response. Meetings generate notes and action items. Phone calls need to be returned. Ideas occur to us ad hoc, and yes, there is still some paper-based input that comes our way. How do we process all of this stuff? This is actually a fundamental skill of knowledge work, and unfortunately, it is hardly ever taught. But it is crucial. A good workflow process enables you to clear the decks for greater engagement and get things done with less friction and frustration. Yet most of us actually, by default, do not tend to follow these principles. For example, many of us fall into the trap of using our email inbox as a small to-do list. Not a great practice, though I know we do it a lot. Sometimes we even end up using our inbox as a holding tank for major projects. That is a really bad idea. But there are things we can do that make stuff like that and just the general managing of new input easier, and so that we aren't making things up as we go. And the thing is, we don't want to go through the day with this sense of having 1,000 open loops continually before us. This mental distraction gets in the way, it limits our flow and slows down the process of doing our most important work. But as David Allen says, if we know how to clear the decks and process new input well, it fosters new productive thinking that happens almost by itself. And it increases our ability to handle greater engagement with the world. So the goal of this session is to give you some simple practices that will enable you to manage all of your daily inputs, especially email, in a simple, effective way. So step one is collect. You can't process the input that is coming your way if you don't capture it. Lots of it comes our way automatically, like email, of course, but some of it actually comes through conversations, voicemail, and even our own ideas. Having some type of capture tool with you in general allows you to capture these things. But then what do you do? Step two, process the new input that you've collected. Now, there are 3 big rules of processing stuff. So envision your email inbox here, and David Allen summarizes these so well. When you got your email inbox, first thing you need to remember is you need to process in order, you need to do one at a time, and you never put anything back into in. So first, process in order. This means do not jump around your inbox. That simply feels disorganized, and on top of that, it creates more disorganization. It's easy to say, well, I don't want to deal with this email. That looks hard. I'm going to go down to this one. It looks easier. And we all do that to a certain extent sometimes, but in general, it is not a good practice. You will be much more effective and have a greater sense of momentum if you just go in order. This is really an application of the old productivity maxim, only handle a piece of paper once. The point behind that is the more times you have to go back and look at something, the more time you're wasting, and you're clogging up your mental RAM because you're not fully dealing with the item when you see it. It gets open loops going in your mind, and instead of closing those by dealing with the issue, you move on to the next thing, and this is why our mental RAM is often busting at the seams. So go through your inbox in order and process each item to completion as it comes up. Second, process one thing at a time. Now, this is really a corollary to going in order. Finish processing the email or item you are working on before you go to the next. Don't do it halfway and then move on. Deal with it decisively, then move on. And then third, nothing goes back into in. This is what we do so often when we're processing the mail, the physical mail. We open something up, we're like, okay, what is this? Okay, I get it. I don't want to deal with it. We put it back into our inbox. Don't do that. Really, this is just another way of saying what we've already been saying. Handle it once. Pick it up, deal with it, then move on to the next thing. Okay, so what does it mean to actually process an item? And there's really 2 questions you ask. First, what is it? And second, what's the next action? You need to know what it is before you can know the next action? So that's really the first question. There's all sorts of different types of things that come your way. But the key question is really, what's the next action? Is there something that I need to do about this? Now, anything that comes your way, whether it's an email or piece of physical mail, falls into one of just a few categories. It's either trash, information, actionable, or reference. Okay? So if it's trash, like a spam email, this is simple. You just delete it. You get rid of it. Or if it's junk mail, you just throw it away. You're done. That's easy. If it's information, then you got a little bit you need to do. Let's say, for example, you get an invite to a wedding, either by email or in the physical mail. And on that invite, first of all, there's an action you need to do, which is the next step. We'll talk about that, but you need to RSVP. So maybe you RSVP, but then that invite has other things on it, like the location of the wedding, the time. That's stuff you need to know. How do you remember that? Here's how not to remember it. Don't keep it in your inbox and say, okay, I'm going to look this up a month from now when it's time to go to the wedding. That is so annoying. And then think about it. You get other emails with information, your rental car information for an upcoming trip, the hotel you're staying at, and the address. If you just keep this in your inbox, that is so cluttered and annoying. Instead, take the information out and put it in the spot where you will actually need it and can logically make use of it. With like a wedding invitation, that would be on your calendar. So you put on your calendar you create an event for the time of the wedding, you put the address in that calendar item in the note field or the location field. If there are other things you need to remember, like where they're registered for the gift, put it in the note field. Whatever you need to remember from that invite, you put into the note field of the calendar item. Then what do you do with the invite? You throw it away. You archive it, hit archive. If you're using email, if it's a physical thing in the mail, just throw it away. Then it's done and you've gotten what you need. That's how you handle information. Now, what if an item is a task? It requires action. If it requires action, there are two ways you can handle it. First, if it's something you can do in 2 minutes or less, do it right away. That's called the 2-minute rule. So many people find it so freeing. The reason you do it right away is because it's actually quicker to do a 2-minute item right away than track it on a list. What if it's going to be longer than 2 minutes? That's where things get a little complicated, actually. This is where project and action lists come in. Let's say you receive an email saying they want you to redesign the website. That's a project. That's a big project. What you need to do is put that on your project list. You have a new project, redesign website. And with the email, you get rid of it because now you've defined what you need to do and you don't want it cluttering you. Now that email might have information you need, specifications for how they want the website to operate, goals for the project, stuff like that. How do you remember that? Well, you handle it. Now that falls in the information category. Now you're not going to put that into a calendar invite like you do like with a wedding invitation, but you'll create a file for the project and you could either save that email right into that file or paste it into a Word document in that file, and you use the file to keep track of that information. That way you don't have to keep going back to your inbox, and then you hit archive and it's out of your inbox. Now, of course, if you do for some reason need to go back to the email, notice I keep saying archive, not delete. So you can go into the archive, the all messages of Gmail or whatever you're using. If you do for some reason need to go back to the original email, you can. You'll find it there, but don't keep it in your inbox. You don't need to, and that just clutters. So that's really how you handle initiatives that come by email that are longer than 2 minutes. And then how do you make sure that project happens once it's on your project list? Well, that's why we have weekly planning and those other things that we've talked about. And we'll talk a little bit about daily execution in the next session. So that's how you handle items, input that comes your way. That's a task that's longer than 2 minutes. And then last of all, there's reference. Maybe HR sends out a memo on certain policies and it's not actionable. You just need to know about it. You need to remember it. You might need to refer back to it at some point. That's what I call reference, and I recommend keeping that in your files. Some people like to keep email files, and that's fine if you really like it. And so they create folders for each department or subject or whatever. I prefer having my files all in one place. So I just, in the documents folder of my Mac is where I keep my files organized by department, and you can actually save emails into your files. And that's where I save reference material I need to look back at. The result is your inbox, it's only for unprocessed items. This simplifies things so much. Your inbox is not for storing items or reminding you of what you have to do. It's for unprocessed items. That's why it's called the inbox. So that each time you look at your inbox, you know these are unprocessed items and you know the process for handling them. Now, the last step I talked about is organize and act. And we've actually already talked about how to organize and structure things and then act. You will have created some items on your list, your project list and next action list, and you want to act on those. And you act on those in accord with your plan, the time slots you've defined to do your next actions. And that's something that we are going to talk about in the next session. Now, what you have here is an overview of how to process workflow. It is a lot of information, no doubt. So it can be useful to read the chapter in the book where I give a little bit more expanded treatment on this. And obviously I'm building on David Allen. I'm adjusting him in some places. It's not a mere summary. It's a synthesis. It's an application of what he's done, but I've really reduced things. Go take a look at his book. Take a look at my chapter in What's Best Next. And then I have a longer blog post on my blog, What's Best Next, called How to Get Your Email Inbox to Zero Every Day. And that you can keep it before you as reference as you go through your inbox, applying these principles. And next, we are going to move on to taking a look at how to go about executing your day, getting things done in the moment. We'll look at a few core principles.